this number, the amount of fertilizer, go up as we progress through these years. So we're in 1930, now we're in 1970, we're down to 2.3 crops. Fewer farms, more fertilizer. And then 2010, we're down to an average of 1 crop. Fewer farms, more fertilizer. And then the subsequent points of this are really just showing us what the components of the modern Farm Bill are. So we see that 73% of the funding in the Farm Bill is going towards nutrition programs like SNAP, WIC, National School Lunch Program, etc. Okay. We can see how the Farm Bill has affected agricultural policy, or what we're growing. We see a picture here of a confined animal feeding operation. So the way that we are producing plants is also mirrored by some of the ways that we've changed our production of animals. So the production of beef or the cattle farms are run like a factory. And so they require lots of energy input. And also the feed that we're providing to the cattle has changed the composition of the meat that we're eating. Okay, so the fatty acid structure of the meat is very different than what it was when the animals were being grass-fed. We're also injecting hormones to increase the yield and shorten the growth time. And so I have a list here of some of the results of agricultural trends. We have an overabundance of pests, weed overgrowth, soil depletion, new disease-causing bacteria cropping up, pollution and waste. We're going to focus on this, especially the waste end when we look at the drivers of sustainable food. Also, we have fewer companies making a decision about how we're going to be fed. So few companies making the decisions about what we're going to eat instead of more of a democratic way of looking at how food is determined. We see control over the farmers affecting the agricultural production, and then also we're very dependent on inputs. We'll talk a little bit later about why these trends and the reduction in diversity actually they're making us more vulnerable to problems in the future. So we have this concept of cheap foods that skew the true cost of food. Okay, so as an example here, the real price of fruits and vegetables between 85 and 2000 increased by nearly 40%, while the real price of soft drinks declined by 23%. So something like a soft drink that has to be produced and canned the price has gone down in this time frame, but we see that fruits and vegetable prices have gone up. So we have these cheap foods that are actually skewing the cost. If you can purchase something for a very cheap cost that's going to, in the long term, contribute to the detriment of your health, there's some discussion now of how maybe some more of that responsibility needs to go back to those who are producing the food, because they're reaping the benefit. Humans are suffering harm, and then that harm has been paid for by medical costs, etc. Okay, so if we compare farming practices, the industrial is on the far left to industrial organic, and sustainable. We see some big differences here. What do you guys think is the difference between industrial organic and organic? What do we see here? Have you guys noticed in the organic trend that now there are organic foods that are made in Michigan and shipped to California, right? Or organic has become more of an industry, right? So organic is not necessarily sustainable. So if you're looking for organic and local, that's going to be different than industrial organic. So in terms of energy input, though, industrial organic is clearly superior to just industrial agriculture. Okay, so in terms of fossil energy is high here. One of the major reasons that this is different than this is the amount of energy that goes into fertilizer production. And we're going to see a graph that shows that in a little bit. But we sometimes think that local foods are superior to other, even organic foods, because you're not using fossil fuels to move them around. But actually the amount of fossil fuels that's going into the production of the fertilizers that are being used on industrial crops is a huge contributor to the amount of energy they use. Okay, so we could see a combination here. Alternative energies are favored with sustainable production. In terms of market, we have a global market, a national market, and then we have a more local market with the organic and sustainable farms. Specialized production, these tend to be more diversified, more crops grown on a plot of land, etc. We've talked about pesticides and fertility. All right, so the organic farming movement began in the 40s in response to all of these chemicals that were being introduced to farming. And it used a systems approach, wanting to mimic nature. I don't know if any of you guys have seen some of the documentaries that have been out. The Polyface Farms in North Carolina is often featured on these documentaries about food and showing how the animals are used as a system with the plants to help fertilize, etc. So this is what we're talking about here, mimicking nature. As organic has become more popular, it has become a business. So there are big corporations actually buying out organic farms. And I've actually noticed this recently with even walking into Ralph's. There's more and more organic foods that are offered. So there's more of a push for increased demand for organic farming. Farmers markets have also increased in growth, and we will see at the end of the lecture how farmers markets we've created a policy to try to attract even underprivileged populations to go into the farmers market, such as WIC, Chuck, and SNAP, being able to be accepted there. So we've seen a great increase in farmers market, particularly between 1994 and 2010. They over doubled. Okay, then sustainable farming and urban farms, which your last lecturer talked a good bit about, have been part of the movement. Another outcropping of these changes in agriculture is genetic modification. So what do you guys know about genetic modification?
They're replacing part of the plant's DNA with new DNA so that you can spray it with poisons and it can kill.
Okay, that is one of the major drivers behind genetic modification, is to create plants that are herbicide resistant. You're right. So genetic modification requires taking a donor gene and inserting it into the DNA of a commercial variety to produce a new crop. And sometimes you will hear proponents of genetic modification say that it's similar to other ways that we have affected our food supply in the past, like selective breeding. It's not anything like that. We see here how selective breeding differs. So with selective breeding, you take a plant with a desired trait and you breed it with a commercial variety. So you end up with this new plant that has a mixture of the genes from both of these. So it is not the same thing as selective breeding. Okay, so reasons for use. Produces herbicide-resistant varieties. Sometimes we can see production of varieties that make their own insecticides. We've also seen another argument used for genetic modification is to be able to change the nutrition profile of a plant. An example here is golden rice that's been made for production in certain parts of Asia. It has a higher vitamin A content than regular rice. Vitamin A is one of the major micronutrients of concern in Asia. Worldwide, genetic modification is not well embraced. Okay? There is skepticism over the long-term effects of genetic modification. We don't know what changing the genes of a plant will do to the environment long-term or to human health. And once you put it out there and it starts growing, you can't take it back. So for example, there are bans and restrictions in Peru, Russia, France, Ireland, Japan, Egypt. There's quite a list of countries that have bans against genetic modification. Labeling of genetically modified foods. You guys may have noticed in the last election, there was a proposal in California to require labeling of GM foods that did not pass. But in many countries, the European Union requires labeling, And a lot of other countries, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, China, et cetera, are also requiring it.